You have been making promises to yourself for years. Not the kind one you make to other people or the ones with deadlines and consequences and someone watching to make sure you follow through. I mean, the quiet kind, the ones that only you hear, the one that happens at 2 in the middle of the night when you cannot sleep because something about how you have been living just doesn't sit right anymore. You promised yourself you would start waking up earlier, and you meant it when you said it. You promised yourself you would stop scrolling past midnight, and you felt the sincerity of that promise in your chest when you made it. You promised yourself you would finally start the thing, the real thing, the one you have been circling for months or maybe years, and in the moment of that promise, you could actually see the version of yourself who had already done it, and then you did not do it. Not because you are lazy, not because something dramatic happened, not because the universe conspired against you. You just quietly stopped and quietly moved on, and you quietly revised the story so it felt like a broken promise and more like a reasonable adjustment. Here is what nobody in this space is saying out loud, and I need to say it because I watched this pattern destroy 3 years of my own progress before I understood what was actually happening. The problem is not your discipline. The problem is not your routine, your morning system, your habits, or your environment. The problem is that you have broken so many promises to yourself that your own nervous system has stopped believing you when you speak. And matter of fact, I'm not being dramatic when I say that. I'm being clinical. There is a record being kept inside of you, and it is not a metaphor, it is a neurological fact. Every time you said you would do something and then found a quiet way not to, your brain logged that as a data. Every restart that lasted 4 days before life got inconvenient and you silently abandoned the commitment without even acknowledging to yourself that you abandoned it, that got logged too. You do not have to consciously remember each one because your body remembers all of them. And that is why right now, when you sit down to do the thing you told yourself you were going to do today, there is a half second of resistance that shows up before you even begin. That resistance is not laziness. That resistance is not a lack of motivation. That is a trust deficit, and the person you do not trust is yourself. The entire self-improvement world is built around the idea that discipline is about willpower, about gritting your teeth, about forcing yourself to do it even when you do not want to. And there is a partial truth in that. I'm not going to pretend there is not. But a deeper problem that nobody names is this. Discipline is not actually about doing the hard thing. Discipline is the act of treating your own word as binding. Most people have never made that decision. They have made promises, they have set goals, they have built systems, they have tried everything the productivity industry sells, but they have never once sat down and decide clearly and finally that when they say they are going to do something, that means they are going to do it. Not try to do it, not attempt if conditions are favorable, not give it a shot and see how it goes. Do it the way you would if you told your boss you would deliver a report by Friday, the way you would if you promised your child you would be at their game. You keep that promise because breaking it has a cost that you have decided is too high to pay. The promise you made to yourself at 2 in the morning has no cost attached to breaking it, and that is exactly why you keep breaking it. You have given yourself unlimited permission to fail on your own commitment, and then you wonder why your confidence is eroding underneath you like sand. Here is a sentence that changed everything for me, and I want you to hear it without rushing past it. You are not undisciplined, you are in a trust crisis with yourself. That is a completely different diagnosis, and it demands a completely different treatment. If the problem is discipline, the answer is more effort, right? More systems, more willpower, more grind. But if the problem is trust, the answer is the opposite of more. The answer is One small promise kept today. One, that is it. Not a new morning routine, not a 90-day challenge, not a complete life overhaul that you design on a Sunday night and abandon by Wednesday afternoon. One promise kept today so that tomorrow when you make another promise, your nervous system has one piece of fresh evidence that your word still means something. That is how trust is rebuilt between two people when it has been broken. And that is exactly how trust is rebuilt between you and yourself. You would not trust a friend who had broken 40 promises to you just because they showed up one morning with a detailed plan for how they were going to be different this time. You would trust them when they started keeping small promises consistently, without drama, without announcement, without a performance of change. You will trust them when their behavior started matching their words and the gap between what they said and what they did started closing quietly over weeks and months. That is the exact same process you need to run with yourself. And the fact that nobody frames it this way is the reason you have been stuck. I want to tell you about a pattern I have watched play out so many times that I stopped counting, and each time the details change, but the structure is identical. There was a woman in the community, she will know I am talking about her, and she gave me permission to share this, who joined Luminaries HQ in January with a 90-day fitness goal. She had a plan, the app, the accountability partner, the whole architecture that everyone tells you to build. By day 11, she had missed 2 sessions, and instead of running the reset, she did what most people do. She went quiet. Not dramatically, she did not announce that she was quitting. She just stopped logging her workouts and hoped nobody would notice. When she came back 3 weeks later and I asked her what happened, she said something I have heard 100 times now. She said she did not want to be the person who could not even keep a simple promise. What she meant was the shame of the gap between her identity and her behavior was so uncomfortable that she would rather disappear than face it. That is not a discipline problem. That is a trust problem wearing a discipline costume. I watched a man in his 40s restart the same morning routine 7 times in 1 year, each time with minor adjustments to the system as if the system was the variable that needed fixing. The system was never broken. His relationship with his own word was broken, and no amount of app optimization was going to repair that. I have lived this myself, and I need you to know that because I am not speaking from a distance. I spent 3 years cycling through productivity systems, journaling frameworks, and accountability structures, while the actual problem sat quietly underneath all of it, untouched, unnamed, and unfixed. The actual problem was that I had trained myself through hundreds of small quiet failures to expect that my own word meant nothing. The hardest part of that realization was not the realization itself. It was admitting that nobody had done this to me. I had done it to myself through the accumulation of every small promise I had let dissolve without consequence. Now, here is a real objection to everything I just laid out, and I want to state it fairly because if you're thinking it, I want you to know I have already taught it too. The objection is this: sometimes promises get broken because life genuinely intervenes, because priorities shift, because what you committed to in January no longer makes sense in April, and framing every broken commitment as a trust violation is a recipe for toxic self-criticism, not self-improvement. That is a legit concern, and I want to be honest, there is a truth in it. Priorities should change and plans should evolve, and rigid commitments to outdated goals is its own form of self-harm. But here is the distinction that separates healthy flexibility from the pattern I am naming. Healthy flexibility is a conscious decision to redirect commitment made out loud, acknowledge clearly, with a replacement commitment that you take just as seriously. The pattern I am naming is silent. It is the quiet dissolution of a promise that you never officially ended. You just stop doing it and hope that that the passage of time would make the gap invisible. One of those is leadership of your own life. The other is avoidance disguised as flexibility, and your nervous system knows the difference even when your conscious mind does not. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in what I have described, I want you to know something with absolute certainty. You have done this not once, not twice. You have done this so many times that you stopped counting, and every single time you had a perfectly reasonable explanation for why this time was different from the pattern. The explanation was never the point. The pattern was the point, and the pattern has been running your life while you focus on the individual episodes. The reason you feel that half second of resistance before you start is not because you lack something other people have. It is because your body has compiled a complete and accurate history of your follow-through rate, and that history is informing your expectations in real time. You are not lazy. You are living inside a trust deficit that you built one quiet broken promise at a time. You do not need a new system. You need to start keeping your word at a scale so small that failure is almost impossible. That is not a motivation line. That is the actual clinical approach to rebuilding trust. Here is how to run it, and I want you to take this seriously, because what the luminaries inside Luminaries HQ have been proving across the last 90 days is that this works when nothing else has. Tonight, before you go to sleep, make one promise to yourself for tomorrow. One promise, and it needs to be specific enough that there is zero ambiguity about whether you kept it. Not I will be more productive, because that means nothing. Not I will work on my goals, because there is no finish line in that sentence. Something like I will be out of bed and standing before 7:15 a.m. and I will write 300 words before I open any social media app. One promise, specific, timed, and binary. You either did it or you did not, and then tomorrow you keep it. You do not keep it because it will change your life overnight. It will not. You keep it because you are placing the first deposit in a trust account that has been overdrawn for years, and the compound interest on that deposit is a thing that eventually changes everything. This has never been about motivation. Move before motivation arrives. That is the standard, and the luminaries who are living right now started exactly where you are. The hardest thing I have to tell you is that nobody is coming to fix this for you. No video, including this one, no cause, no community, no accountability partner is going to do the thing that only you can do, which is decide that your word to yourself is binding. That decision happens in a moment, and it happens alone, and it happens without fanfare or drama or a social media post about how you are changing your life. It happens the next time you are lying in bed and the alarm goes off and the promise you made is sitting there waiting to be either kept or quietly filed away with all the others. That moment is where everything is decided, and you are the only person in the room when it happens. Alright, enough of that. The next video is going to answer a question that I know is already forming in your mind right now, which is this: if one small promise is where it's at, how do you actually build from there without falling back into the same cycle? How do you audit the promises you are making to make sure they are the right ones? And how do you handle the inevitable day when you fall off without letting it destroy the trust you have started to rebuild? That is the promise audit, and it is coming next. If you watch this entire video and recognize yourself in it, you already know what you are. The community inside Luminaries HQ, link in the description. Come find your people. Tonight, make one promise to yourself for tomorrow. Write it down, make it specific, and keep it. That is your only assignment, and it is due before you fall asleep tonight. Luminaries treat their own word as a contract they do not break, because the person on the other side of that contract is the one who has to live with the consequences. Till I see you again, shine on.